Today, we're going to focus on the slope-intercept form of a linear equation. What's that? Let's go to the math lab to find out. This is the general form of an equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. The x and the y in this equation are unknown variables that can represent many values in any one equation. As you've probably seen in other equations, x and y together stand for ordered pairs that can be plugged into the equation to make a true statement. Every x and y pair that fits in the equation is a point on the line. The m and the b in this equation, however, are different types of variables. M and b are fixed variables, which means that they stand for numbers that stay constant within any one equation. M is always the coefficient of x, or the number that x is multiplied by. And b is the constant term, or plain number, that is added or subtracted to the x term. So, in the slope-intercept equation, y equals 1/2 x plus 2, the coefficient of x, or 1/2, is m. And the constant term, or 2, is b. The fixed values for m and b can tell you quite a bit about the line in question. The value for m gives you the slope of the line, and the value for b tells you its y-intercept. So it makes sense that y equals mx plus b is called the slope-intercept form of an equation. One way to graph the equation, y equals 1/2 x plus 2, is to make a table of values and plot the points from the table onto a graph. To make the table, we label one column x and one column y, and put the expression for y, 1/2 x plus 2, directly from the equation into the middle column of the table. Then we pick several values for x, put each of those values in the expression for x, and evaluate the expressions to find corresponding values for y. Each x-y pair represents a point, x, y, that can be plotted on a graph to form a line. And the line graphically shows us all the solutions to the equation y equals 1/2 x plus 2. This much you've probably seen before, but remember, we graphed this equation to investigate how m and b in an equation translate to the slope and y-intercept on a graph. So let's take a closer look at the graph to find the slope and the y-intercept. One way to find the slope of a line is to pick 2 points on the line and draw a slope triangle to find the ratio of rise and run between these 2 points on the graph. So, if we pick these 2 points, we find that from one point to the other, the change in y, or rise, is 1, and the change in x, or run, is 2. So the slope, m, is 1/2. We see it on the graph, and it tells us so in the equation. To find the y-intercept, we look to the place on the graph where the line crosses the y-axis. This happens at the point 0, 2. So the y-intercept is 2. We see it on the graph and in the equation. So you see how the equation y equals 1/2 x plus 2 includes 2 pieces of information about the line that is its graph, its slope, and its y-intercept. This is why an equation in the form y equals mx plus b is said to be in slope-intercept form. We've seen that m, the coefficient of x, is the slope of the line, and that b, the constant term, is the y-intercept. With this information readily available in the equation, It's unnecessary to go through the trouble of making a table to graph a linear equation in slope-intercept form. There's a much quicker way to graph equations in slope-intercept form. You can simply read the slope and the y-intercept straight from the equation, and use these two facts to sketch an accurate graph. Let's take another look at the equation, and I'll show you how to make a fast graph. To graph the equation y equals 1/2 x plus 2, using its slope, 1/2, and its y-intercept, 2, there are just a few quick steps. The first step is to locate the y-intercept on the graph. Since the equation tells us that the line crosses the y-axis at 2, we'll mark this spot with a point. Then, because the slope, 1/2, equals rise over run, we know that from any point on a line, if we rise up 1 unit and run over 2 units, we'll end up at another point on the line. Finally, we just draw the line that passes through the 2 points. And we're done. We have the graph of the equation y equals 1/2 x plus 2. This is the exact same line we found when we plotted the points from the table, only we got to it much quicker by using the slope and y-intercept to make the graph. Before we go on, let's write some of this down in our notes. Slope-intercept form. The linear equation y equals mx plus b is in slope-intercept form. The slope of the line is m, and the y-intercept is b. To quickly graph equations in slope-intercept form, there are 4 steps. First, identify the slope and y-intercept in the equation. Then, plot the y-intercept on the graph. Third, use the slope to find a second point. And finally, draw the line that passes through the 2 points.